welcome whoever is watching in live. Thanks very much for taking the time to join myself. I am a Parkinson's advocate, lived with Parkinson's the last 7 years, and delighted to be here to talk about the Mind Moves Matter and University College Cork collaboration on a pilot study on women with Parkinson's disease. So just let Lucy, you want to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Rochelle, and thanks for the opportunity today. So I'm representing the study from the University Cork side. The lead on the project is Professor Aideen Sullivan, who's worked on Parkinson's and the needs of people with Parkinson's for quite a number of years now, and very interested in collaborating with individuals with Parkinson's disease to look at unmet needs and research in more areas those unmet needs. So I suppose I am part of the clinical side of Aideen's group, and I lead on the clinical projects. And one of those projects is looking at those issues faced by women who may be actively menstruating, as well as, different hormonal stages with Parkinson's disease. So Rochelle, you came to Aideen and myself with this project, and we're very happy to be here today and to talk about where we're at and what we would hope for the future in terms of this research, and to give some updates on where we're at the moment. So thanks very much. Yeah, my first time as well doing a Facebook Live, but I can see that there are some people commenting and some people online there listening. So yeah,
Great.
As Rochelle said, we'd be happy to kind of take questions as well along the way.
Hey, great. Well, what I'm going to do is just do a little presentation I'm going to share with you to kind of give you a backdrop as to why we got to this stage and why this study is really important. So I'm just going to share my screen here. So there might be a lag for people in terms of, I think, when it gets onto the Facebook, it's a couple of seconds behind. So I'm just going to take it from the beginning. Okay, so just bear with me a second there. Okay, so as I say, I'm just going to give a caveat here. So I'm not a neurologist or a gynecologist. I'm a healthcare professional, a registered dietitian. I'm a woman living with young onset Parkinson's disease. I'm a wife and mum of 2 kids and 2 pets, and I'm an advocate for my health and that of other people with Parkinson's. So just in terms of, when I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, I actually picked it up when I was pregnant, 3 months pregnant with my daughter. And after she was born and I went back to normal menstruation, I noticed that my Parkinson's symptoms tended to be worse the week before my menstrual bleed. And, the symptoms are very like many women who are on here, perhaps watching this, have suffered from premenstrual syndrome symptoms, of which there are many, and a lot that we can identify with here. So things like bloating, headache, fatigue, social anxiety, irritation, mood, these are all PMS symptoms. So they're kind of the premenopause stage of a woman's life from when she has her first period until she starts perimenopause. There's also what I would describe as PMS on speed, which is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. And you can see here that a lot of really strong symptoms: depressed mood, anxiety, tension, anger, irritability, lack of energy, fatigue, change in appetite, food cravings, changes in sleep. And if you look here in the image on the right-hand side, this is the Parkinson's iceberg. And you can see a lot of the invisible non-motor symptoms are very similar to that of premenstrual and premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So what happens is that basically it's to do with the hormones changing along the menstrual cycle. So basically, as estrogen drops and progesterone drops the week before your menstrual bleed, this is what causes all of these really severe symptoms. And myself and a number of my Parkinson's advocate female friends noticed that we were having the same problem with the symptoms getting worse the week before and the week during our menstrual bleed. And so through the Women's Parkinson's Project and the PD Avengers, we disseminated a survey worldwide, which roughly about 190 women completed, and it showed that 86% reported that their Parkinson's symptoms were worse the week before their menstrual bleed, 49% during the menstrual bleed, and then a small percentage after that. And we asked then in that survey what motor symptoms were worse, and you'll see here rigidity, bradykinesia, tremor, dystonia, dyskinesia, and voice volume were the most affected. In terms of non-motor symptoms, fatigue was the top, followed by anxiety, depression, insomnia, apathy, and then you can see as we go down the list. What was really astounding was when we asked the women whether the neurologist actually spoke to them about the potential of hormones to impact their Parkinson's in terms of impacting their menstrual cycle, impacting their symptoms, or around the perimenopause. It was an overwhelming 90% of women said that neurologists did not engage around this. Now, this is probably not entirely surprising because neurologists, unlike many other consultants, are not actually educated about the different hormonal stages and impact on women's different health conditions. But this survey led us to do a webinar with the Cure Parkinson's Trust and also with the PMD Alliance. And from that, we realized that there were a lot of concerns that women were mentioning, from hormonal fluctuations around the menstrual cycle, but also around menopause and perimenopause, postmenopause, issues in terms of fear of living alone, fear of dementia. There was a lot of issues that women were raising, stigma, the impact on work. And so we decided to get together and draft and publish a paper on the unmet needs of women with Parkinson's. And this is driven by Indu Subramanian, who's a movement disorder specialist in the US, who has been instrumental in helping us to actually move the agenda forward for to basically solve the unmet needs of women with Parkinson's. So you can see here, it shows that there are different hormonal stages, from pre-menopause in terms of when you're menstruating, to pregnancy, perimenopause, menopause, and the post-menopause. Subsequent to the survey we did, and subsequent to the paper, I'm delighted to say that the Fox Insight platform, thanks to Sonia Mather, Christy LaMonica, Kat Hill, and Helen Matthews, really driving this survey on the Insight platform. And the results there were very similar. 79% of women said that they weren't been asked about their hormones by the movement disorder specialists. 50% of women didn't bring up the topic because they felt they were dismissed. There wasn't time, the doctor wasn't knowledgeable enough to educate them about it. And motor symptoms were reported to have the greatest impact. And actually, almost 44% indicated that medication was less effective the week prior to the menstrual bleed, and 30% during. So there's definitely some impact of the hormonal cycle on medication efficacy as well. This was also followed by a survey done by a team in Spain, the Hebron group, who had a survey of women, predominantly made up of women in Spain and South America. And basically, again, it showed that 67% said that their changes in their Parkinson's symptoms were during the menstrual cycle, and 68% was actually during the week of menstruation. But also almost 40% indicated that medication is less effective during the menstrual cycle. So in terms of, they were all surveys, so they're sort of retrospective data. There's only one prospective, which is where you're sort of studying someone in the real world. One small study that was done of 11 women who had regular menstrual cycles in 2023. It was presented at the Movement Disorder Congress. And basically, it showed that, so in terms of the women who took part, 9 women took part in the observations. 6 were affected by young onset, 3 were in the premenopausal period or perimenopausal, and all of them were on medication except 1. And basically, the results of this study confirmed a role of estrogen in the dopaminergic pathways, and basically showed that the drop in estrogen was causing this worsening of the Parkinsonian symptoms. And basically, they said that a high level of estrogen appears to be neuroprotective, but further investigations are required. I was just going to go into the kind of perimenopause and menopause, some of the research there. So perimenopause is basically when your hormones start to change before your periods have completely stopped. Usually occurs between 45 and 60. And during this time, menstrual periods become less regular, and a range of symptoms can occur due to these hormonal changes. Menopause then is once you have not had a period for 12 months, and you've reached the menopause. It can take time for our bodies to adapt to these changes, and symptoms due to hormonal changes may persist. So we did a survey again of women asking questions around the perimenopause and menopause. And basically, these are the perimenopause symptoms that women reported. So things like night sweats, flushing, sleep disturbance, vaginal dryness, fatigue, reduced libido, brain fog, anxiety, urinary urgency, mood swings, and depression. And then we asked women during the menopause and perimenopause, did you notice whether your symptoms improved, whether they got worse, or whether you weren't sure? So basically, 32% of women said that their Parkinson's symptoms got worse during the transition into the menopause. 65% were unsure. And I think that really reflects the fact that the symptoms are very similar between menopause and Parkinson's. So it could be hard to actually define which is which. In terms of the impact of the perimenopause or menopause on Parkinson's symptoms, this is what the women reported, that the menopausal symptoms worsened the Parkinson's symptoms. So difficulty sleeping, worse stiffness and rigidity, worsening tremor, anxiety, etc. And you can see down through the list there. So definitely women were reporting that their Parkinson's symptoms were worsened by transition into the menopause. The other thing is then looking at some research showing the difference between pre and post-menopause. So again, the Hebron team reported that 20 to 25% of the women reported a worsening of their symptoms during transition to menopause. And also in terms of this little chart here, it shows that basically constipation and urinary urgency were worse in the post-menopause phase and menopause phase than it was in the reproductive age or the perimenopause. There was also a study done by Wilinka Capel under the Radboud, under Bas Bloom's team, along with Anne Oosterban. And basically this showed that 2/3 of women in their study reported an increase in severity of symptoms after the menopause. Many symptoms related to the menopause, as again, are hard to distinguish from Parkinson's symptoms. Women may have trouble to identify their issues and need to discuss them with their healthcare professionals. And it's important to change the current lack of engagement of neurologists regarding this topic. And adjusting treatment or referring women to gynecologists to consider hormonal treatment options, as well as creating awareness among women with PD, could help improve their treatment. And then I was involved with a neurologist who was doing a study, Eva Bunting in the UK in Sussex, who did a study of women in her clinic, and also I did an online study alongside that. But basically, you can see here that again, they identified the commonality of particularly the non-motor symptoms overlapping with Parkinson's disease and menopause. And they recommended that vasomotor symptoms could be considered as part of the non-motor symptoms questionnaire for women with Parkinson's. But neurologists must engage with GPs and gynecologists to develop evidence-based guidelines for the use, including optimal timing for HRT in individuals with Parkinson's. Research into any neuroprotective benefits of HRT for Parkinson's patients within the critical window of menopause is needed. And in lieu of Parkinson's-specific evidence, neurologists and Parkinson's nurses should uphold the 2015 NICE guidelines on the treatment of menopausal symptoms for patients with Parkinson's. So I just want to highlight one specific, a couple of things that are quite different in terms of women with Parkinson's versus men. Dyskinesia is repeatedly reported as being more prevalent in women. It is often a side effect of the levodopa medication. And the problem is that there was no big study, controlled study of levodopa performed before its approval in 1991 that actually looked at the sex and gender impact. So we have no studies, very few, until recently over the last few years. And in particular, there was a study in 2022 that showed that women might require a 25% reduced levodopa dosage compared with men to choose it, because we tend to absorb it more. Also, research has shown that women tend to absorb more a levodopa benzuridine, which is like Madapar, more of that than they do the carbidopa levodopa medication. And also they indicate that adjusting levodopa based on body mass index, that's your weight relative to your height, show the most relevant benefit in terms of looking at those drug differences according to gender. And also just to highlight in terms of dyskinesias, there's research to show that tend to occur more frequently in women, particularly when their disease duration is over 5 years. And the issue with dyskinesia is that as you get more dyskinetic, you lose more weight because it uses up a lot of energy. And when you lose weight, you absorb more of your levodopa. So it becomes a vicious circle. So you'll see here people who are weight losers have a lot more dyskinesia than people who are not weight losers. And the female body inherently deals differently with medications. Our kidney clearance of drugs is lower, so it means we have more of it in our system. We have a lower stomach pH, lower plasma volume, lower body mass index. Organ flow is different. Our body water is different. All of these affect how the drug works. And response to drugs are known to be affected by physiological changes during the menstrual cycle. So there are many factors that should be considered when planning care and management of PP in women. So in terms of the next slide, women also are shown to wear off more and have more fluctuations than men. And there was a study called the DEEP study, which analysed women, and it showed that individual wearing off symptoms shows the greater prevalence of non-motor symptoms. So the wearing off in women tends to be more the non-motor anxiety, mood, pain. And also this ties in with the fact that women were more likely than men to actually prescribed antidepressants, antipsychotics, and anxiolytics. So ultimately, we need to study the sex and gender effect. So although gender differences are generally not acknowledged in published clinical guidelines of Parkinson's management, evidence of gender disparities in medication response, pharmacokinetics, and tolerability suggests the need for paying more attention to the difference between women and men in clinical management. And the risk of generalizing data derived from trials in which women are often underrepresented, which women often are, the gender effect should be carefully considered in designing clinical studies. Because ultimately, women are not small men. We are completely different. So these are some of the goals from the unmet needs paper, of which I was involved with, along with two other women with Parkinson's, Sonia Mather and Anya Oosterman, along with two neurologists, Professor Elena Morrow and Adrian Keener, alongside Indu Subramanian. So basically what we said was that we needed to recognize the specific motor and non-motor symptoms and help with optimizing management and personalizing treatment for women, customizing treatment for women's body weight and their unique drug metabolism, develop a tool to communicate with providers and improve symptom tracking, having a diary including menstrual cycles, develop tools to facilitate discussion of hormonal factors to empower women to bring up these topics with their providers, develop strategies to ameliorate the cyclical exacerbation, for example, taking extra medication. So we do know that some women, where their menstrual cycle is affected, that giving extra levodopa has an impact, but also for some women, if they're given the oral contraceptive pill without a break in the cycle, that improves Parkinson's symptoms. But unfortunately, we don't have enough evidence to actually have guidelines for neurologists to be able to actually say this is what we should do. So ultimately, as well, in terms of research, we need to have, look at research on the protective effects of estrogen and the timing of exposure, reduction in monthly hormonal fluctuations using, as I mentioned there, the continuous oral contraceptive pill, and looking at a randomized controlled trial of HRT use, the duration, influence, and does it benefit. So ultimately, the paper led me to take part in a digital hackathon where basically people come together and try and solve a problem. And it was run by an organization called Day One out of Switzerland, just coming towards the end of lockdown, and it was online. And basically I took part and we developed a prototype of an app that will enable women to track their Parkinson's symptoms across a menstrual cycle. We won the hackathon and we won funding with that. I then approached my local enterprise office here in Ireland and also a New Frontiers sort of development program, of which there was funding. And all this funding helped us to develop the app that you see today, which currently has been used by over 1,000 people, and it's free on the Apple and the Google Store. But ultimately, the driver behind it was to actually enable women to see the differences and men to see the difference and help them to self-manage their condition. So I showed you here in terms of the paper that we published. It shows the difference between men and women in terms of their motor and non-motor symptoms. So in terms of women, we tend to be more tremor dominant and tend to have more levodopa-induced kinesias. So in the people who have been tracking on the app to date, we've been able to see through the anonymized data, actually this is reflected. So women tend to have more tremor. Men are showing 11%, women 21%. And women are reporting dyskinesias, where on the men's side, this is the top 10 symptoms being logged. It doesn't even register on the top 10. in terms of the non-motor symptoms, women have more mood and sleep disturbances, anxiety, depression, fatigue, apathy, and pain. And you'll see here in the anonymized aggregated data, it shows similarly that women have difficulty in sleeping, fatigue, muscle and joint pains, which don't really show up on the men's side. And then in terms of women, we have less cognitive impairment, hallucinations, gastro symptoms, and sexual dysfunction. And again, this is actually correlates with the men who seem to have more problems with constipation and the gastro issues, which is constipation and swallow, because swallow is part of the gastrointestinal tract. And also they report more brain fog and difficulty concentration than the women do. So I'm delighted to say that the data that people are putting in is actually showing us that there is a difference between men and women in terms of the way they're tracking their symptoms. So this is really why also we wanted to actually do a prospective study to track women's Parkinson's symptoms across their menstrual cycle. But actually, we realized that it would be really interesting to actually track across all the different hormonal stages. So thanks to Nadine Sullivan and Lucy, who tirelessly worked on the ethics application, have managed to get that extended, that it's not just women who are currently menstruating, but actually women of any age who can take part in the study. But also delighted to report today, again, that they worked very hard to get this. Initially it was the UK, Ireland and the US, but now any woman with Parkinson's of any age around the world can take part, whether you're in Africa or Ireland, Australia or China, you can take part in this study. And ultimately what we've done is we've enabled you to put in a clinical study ID, which is generated when you sign up to the study through the University College Cork platform. And basically, together, we can help women get more tailored treatment by actually taking part in this trial study. We're looking for women with Parkinson's globally to take part who are menstruating, pregnant, perimenopausal, menopausal, or postmenopausal. And women can also be using hormonal medications during this study. Together, we can change the way women with Parkinson's are treated. And you'll see here, that's if anyone wants to scan, that is going to bring you directly into the study survey. So you sign up, you consent. There is a survey to start with, but very importantly, you need to then download the My Moves Matter app. The survey will produce a clinical ID for you. You need to put that into the app, and then you track away. And what we want to do is track your Parkinson's symptoms, your medication, and for those of you who are still menstruating, whether you're menstruating regularly or maybe erratically because you're perimenopausal, we want you to track that. Also, the medications that are listed are the Parkinson's medications, but there are also the hormonal medications there as well. So thanks very much for your time listening to my presentation. And I might just sort of hand over to Lucy in terms of where things are at and if you have any comments or that.
Thanks, Rochelle. That was all very well put. Thank you. And very interesting to hear again from your perspective. Just in terms of the study and where we're at. So we launched the end of January, beginning of February this year. And our study has a couple of nice elements to it, a nice kind of design elements, in that it's totally anonymous. So the data that we are interested in collecting is all anonymized and remote. So we're very interested in collecting information from as many people as possible. And as Rochelle said, we've opened this out in different ways through the university to target people globally from anywhere in the world, as well as any hormonal stage. So we're very interested in more numbers will give us more information in this study. So totally remote study. So hopefully, it'll be easy for people to access and to use and take part, and fully anonymous. And the next kind of nice side or nice element of the study design is that what you spoke about and touched on, Rochelle, is that it's self-reported. So as opposed to going to a clinic and maybe doing a UPDRS or a cognitive assessment or a non-motor scale and talking through with somebody else your symptoms, these are self-reported symptoms that you are going to be monitoring and inputting yourself through our survey and through the app. And the next kind of design element to touch on and talk about in terms of this study is that we have two parts to it. So the first is an online survey where we collect kind of the initial information about yourself. So in terms of kind of general demographics, we'll be asking age groups or age ranges, whereabouts in the world and what kind of ethnicity you fall into, and generally how long you've had Parkinson's disease, what types of medications. So we're collecting these general Parkinson's specific and non-Parkinson's demographics to kind of aid in the general population that we would be looking at. But again, to stress that it cannot be traced back, this information to yourself. And that information is self-reported in that survey element. The next element of the study is through the app, we'll be collecting a lot of data. And that initial survey is like a starting point or a launch point for the app data as well. So when that survey is completed, and as Rochelle talked about, the study ID or the study code, we require you to then use that study code generated in the survey to go on and input that into the app. And that enables us to link the data across the two the survey, and the app anonymously. And then we're very interested in tracking people in the app over time, because what Rochelle spoke about, these phasic data sets. So what I mean by that is that the hormonal phases fluctuate throughout the month. And what we're very interested in looking at is patterns of other types of data that might line up or change with those hormonal stages. So what Rochelle talked about, the non-motor symptoms, the medication not working as effectively in those different hormonal stages. If we can gather data over those 4-month period of using the app, then we can hopefully generate a better picture to aid diagnostic and clinical management of Parkinson's disease. And then at the end of that 4-month period, we'll ask you to take the survey again. And that kind of bookends or data set in terms of following up people over the 4 months and looking at a snapshot of your symptoms, Parkinson's and non-Parkinson's, before and after taking part in the app. And again, that survey will be linked and we'll ask you to input your study ID and study code for the survey. So it's very kind of important in terms of what we're collecting and what we would like to collect from individuals taking part in the study, that you would take part in the initial survey and follow through and complete the data input in the app, as well as the survey at the end of the study design and study research study, to enable us to see that bigger picture. And what we see coming through in terms of publications and breaking publications and new breaking studies in Parkinson's disease is the use of artificial intelligence and machine learning to, instead of just us as scientists looking at a data set, these new tools can be used to look for patterns in data. And what these AI tools are picking up now is maybe subtle signatures or patterns in individuals who are predisposed to maybe developing Parkinson's disease, or at a very early stage of Parkinson's disease, or with manifest Parkinson's, to identify patterns that we would maybe miss looking at a data set in terms of a human's or a couple of humans' perspective, rather than technology like AI. So just to tie that together, what we'd like to do then in terms of using your data that you would volunteer in this study is to maybe use one of these AI machine learning tools to look at that phasic hormonal data set for patterns, and pick out patterns in non-motor, motor symptoms that we may or may not see as individual scientists ourselves. So that's kind of the overall kind of plan, general plan. Is there anything I missed there, Rochelle, or you wanted to pick up on?
No, I think
No.
I think it's fascinating how AI can
Mm,
this is see these as you say subtle, and I think I suppose that's really why we're asking for as many women of
mm,
all ages take part, because you can see in terms of what I presented, in terms of surveys, it's indicating that there's a difference between women's symptoms depending on the week of their cycle, of their menstrual cycle. It also shows that symptoms get worse during the perimenopause, but actually they're still, and also they're worse between premenopausal and postmenopausal. So, I suppose that's what the surveys are showing. And what we want to see is prospectively, in real world, is that actually what is happening? And what's really important is that, from your anonymous data and this research, it hopefully will be able to be the foundation of getting clinical guidelines
mm,
written. And that's ultimately the main aim, is to improve the lives of women with Parkinson's. But I suppose the other thing is to say it's not just about women with Parkinson's, but it's actually really seeing our hormones, because on one of
mm,
the slides I mentioned there that women or men tend to have a faster progression. So is that because we have estrogen, which is neuroprotective? And interestingly, I just was with my gynecologist this morning. That's just happened to be
mm,
on the same day. But interestingly, she was talking through about the different fluctuations of hormones, and she said that actually at the age of 70, women have an increase in estrogen again. So I asked why was that, and she said we don't know. So
mm,
there's a lot we don't know with regard to
mm,
the hormones. And also, she said that when women go through the perimenopause, there are huge high peaks in estrogen, which actually worsen brain fog as much as dips
mm,
in. So, because there's this like huge fluctuations, and she said that some women are more disposed to those huge peaks. So that might be why not every woman, worsens in their Parkinson's symptoms during the. So there's so much that we don't know, and this is like literally a first global study
mm,
of the impact of women's of hormone stage and hormone fluctuations on neurological symptoms of a neurodegenerative disease. It's the first one. It allows people to do it remotely, and for a lot of women who tend to be, working mums or looking after elderly parents, or restricted in movements, you can do this, from your home. So that is, a
mhm,
really plus for this study. I think the other thing as well is now that it's gone global, we noticed when we did the survey, the PD Avengers survey, we did one in Spanish as well, and we noticed there were differences between the symptoms reported. So I think that'll be really interesting as well, as seeing in terms of, is it to do with the location in terms of sunlight, daylight, or the
mm,
latitude, and also in terms of ethnicity. We know that
mm.
Black women suffer apparently much worse menopausal symptoms than Caucasian. So again, it'd be really interesting to see if there was any signals there. So, but ultimately it comes down to the women taking part, and also if we see that those have impact, it could be that research could further develop preclinically, develop a drug from the knowledge of women's hormones for everybody with Parkinson's, so it would benefit men as well as women. So I think there's a lot of untapped potential in our bodies to help, find a drug to slow progression, for sure.
Rochelle, somebody's just asking or mentioning in the comments that about a phone. So I would just stress that the QR code, the links, they can all be used um, online. Can the app be used online, or it's not just iPhone that you use? You can use the app
It's
in, yeah.
Apple or Google or Android. Yes, we use Apple or Android. It can't be used on, website.
Yeah,
It's, it's an app on either the Google or Android
yeah.
website. But what I'd say is you're going to take part in the study is, click on this QR, scan the QR code, or you can go on to mymoosmatter.com and you can click directly. There is the link to go into the study, and it'll bring you through the different steps in terms of downloading the app. If you're already using the app and you want to take part in the study now, you can just go onto the UCC website, study website, and you get your code and you put it in. And the data, the anonymous data, can be looked at. So if you've been tracking already for several months, it can be looked at, but it can only be looked at from the start of the study, which was the beginning of February. So you can put in the code and have your data part of the study. If you haven't downloaded the app, you can go in and download the app and start from fresh. So we're asking women to track for 4 months. That's mainly driven by the fact that in terms of menstrual cycles, obviously they can vary from month to month. So we need to have at least 2 months worth of data. So women who aren't menstruating or menstruating erratically, we still need you to track for the 4-month period to kind of have a comparator with women who are menstruating.
And just to stress, Rochelle, that we have less women taking part in the app at the moment than the survey. So really encourage, if you haven't already, to transition or to kind of follow on and as Rochelle said, to start using the app and inputting if people haven't already, or continue to do so, because that will really give us the best data set to work with.
Yeah. So just to kind of come on the back of that, I don't know whether we've updated the survey to try and make it a bit clearer in terms of the importance of people. So the survey is only one part of the study. The kind of crux of it is really the tracking in the app. And I know that's, it's hard to track and, needs a bit more motivation to do it. But what I would say to you is that by taking part and sharing your anonymous data, you are going to make a huge difference to the treatment for yourself, but also other women with Parkinson's around the world. We need this data to get these clinical guidelines started, to be drafted, so that women do not have to try and convince their neurologists that they're suffering around their menstrual cycle, that it is a known thing. So we can actually change that by taking part in this study.
And just to you reminded me of a point there, Rochelle, that we use on remote and in clinic these validated questionnaires, and one of them is looking at non-motor symptoms, and this is the guideline. Scientists and clinicians publish this, the results from these types of surveys, and we continue to use them again and again because they've been used, historically. But when we designed this study and we did user testing, we consulted yourself and others around the usefulness of different surveys and different questions, and you highlighted to us that the kind of maybe some of the more important or pertinent non-motor symptoms like the vasomotor aren't captured in what we're looking at the moment. So again, it's the gender kind of specific questions that aren't captured. We use those clinical validated questionnaires in our survey because we ultimately want to publish so we can, highlight the data and make it available to clinicians and scientists. We've also added in places to enter free text and other kind of non-motor symptoms that aren't captured in those clinical validated questionnaires. So we're very interested in looking around and looking at the specific needs of women with Parkinson's disease.
Yeah, because I suppose that's back to what Eva Bunting, the neurologist in Sussex, was saying, was that ultimately it'd be great to have the vasomotor included in the non-motor. And, by taking part in this study, and if this, shows that women are really struggling with this, then it gives more weight to maybe convincing the powers that be to actually review the symptom questionnaires from a gender effect point of view. So I'm just looking at the time there. It's just 20 to 5. Thanks very much for everyone taking part. And we look forward to seeing you all again and seeing many women sign up for the pilot study. Thanks very much, Lucy, for taking part.
Thank you,
have a good Thursday.
Me too.